The sound was soft at first, just a faint cry carried by the wind through the dark forest. But it was full of sadness, a cry of desperation and fear. The noise came from a newborn foal. It was blind, weak, and alone. Left in the woods with no one to protect it, the foal didn't know it had been abandoned, but someone did. Graham Winslow, a rich man with a ranch full of champion horses, had decided the blind foal was useless. His words were cold and final. Get rid of it. A horse like this has no future. But Graham didn't know that this wasn't the end of the foal's story. That same night, in a small cabin near the forest, 12-year-old Sadie Harper heard a strange sound. She had always loved animals and couldn't ignore the cry. Grabbing a flashlight, she ran into the woods, determined to find what was making the sound. What Sadie found that night wasn't just a helpless animal. It was the start of a journey that would change everything. Against all odds, Sadie saved the foal and gave it a second chance at life. But what happens when Graham, the man who threw it away, learns what Sadie has done? Graham Winslow stood in his grand office, surrounded by walls lined with awards and photos of champion horses. His name was famous across the country for breeding the best horses in competitions. To Graham, success was everything, and only the strong deserved a place on his ranch. It was early morning, and the sky outside was just beginning to glow with the first light of dawn. A stable hand rushed into the room, looking nervous. "Mr. Winslow, Nova is going into labor," he said quickly. Graham adjusted his tie and reached for his polished mahogany cane. Though he didn't need it to walk, the cane was a symbol of his power. "I trust the team knows what to do," he said coolly. The stable where Nova, his prized mare, was kept was the largest and finest on the ranch. Nova was a legend, with a golden coat that shimmered in the sunlight. Her foals were worth a fortune, and Graham had high hopes for this one. As he entered the stable, the air was filled with tension. Veterinarians surrounded Nova, guiding her through the labor. Graham stood at the entrance, his sharp eyes fixed on every movement. "How much longer?" he asked impatiently. "Not long now, Mr. Winslow," one of the vets replied. Moments later, a tiny foal was born. It wobbled on unsteady legs as it tried to stand, its pale coat gleaming under the light. "It's a colt," the vet announced, smiling. "Strong and well-formed." For a moment, Graham felt satisfied. This was the result of years of careful planning and investment. But then, the mood shifted. One of the assistants whispered urgently to the lead vet, who frowned and bent down to examine the foal more closely. "What's wrong?" Graham demanded, his tone sharp. The vet hesitated before answering. "Mr. Winslow, the colt appears to be blind. Its eyes don't respond to light, and it doesn't move like it can see." A heavy silence filled the stable. Graham stared at the foal, watching it struggle to find its footing. "Blind," he repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "Yes, sir," the vet confirmed. "It's an irreversible condition. The colt won't be able to compete or perform like the others." Graham's face hardened. His voice was cold and final. "A horse that can't compete is useless. I won't waste resources on it." "Mr. Winslow," the vet started cautiously, "with proper care, the foal could still live a peaceful life." "My decision is made," Graham interrupted. "Get rid of it. I don't want to see it again." The stable hands exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to argue. A young caretaker was given the difficult task of carrying out Graham's order. He gently placed the colt into a cart, covering it with a blanket. The journey to the edge of the forest was quiet. The colt let out soft, plaintive cries, unaware of the harsh fate awaiting it. When they reached a clearing, the caretaker carefully lowered the foal onto the cold grass. "I'm sorry, little one," he whispered, stroking its pale coat. "You didn't deserve this." As the caretaker left, the blind foal lay there alone, its small body trembling in the chilly night air. It called out softly, searching for comfort, but the forest gave no reply. Though abandoned and vulnerable, the foal's story wasn't over. Deep within its fragile heart, a spark of resilience began to flicker. Sadie Harper was drying the last of the dinner plates when she heard it, a faint sound that carried through the stillness of the night. She froze, her hand midair, and listened carefully. "Mom, did you hear that?" she asked, turning toward her mother, who was wiping down the counter. "Hear what, sweetheart?" her mom replied, distracted. Sadie strained her ears. There it was again, a soft, broken cry. It was coming from the forest behind their small cabin. It sounded like a horse, Sadie said firmly, and it sounded scared. Her mother frowned. It's late, Sadie. The forest isn't safe at night. But Sadie couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone needed her help. Grabbing an old flashlight from the shelf near the door, she looked back at her mother. I'll be careful, I promise, she said before dashing out into the cool night air. Sadie, come back, her mother called. But the determined 12-year-old was already on the narrow path leading to the woods. Sadie moved quickly, her small feet crunching over dry leaves and twigs. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but the shadows seemed endless. Her heart pounded as she followed the sound, which grew louder with every step. Finally, the light landed on a tiny figure curled up on the cold ground. Sadie gasped. It was a foal, its coat pale as moonlight. The little horse was trembling, its head lifting weakly as she approached. Sadie's heart ached as she knelt beside it. What are you doing out here all alone? She whispered gently. The foal let out a soft, broken cry, and she noticed something unusual about its eyes. They were a cloudy gray, unresponsive to the flashlight's glow. Are you blind? She asked softly. The foal nickered weakly, and Sadie felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and stroked its trembling body. Don't worry, she said firmly. I'm not leaving you here. Sadie tried coaxing the foal to stand, pulling lightly to guide it, but the tiny horse stumbled and collapsed, too weak to move. She bit her lip, realizing she couldn't do this alone. I'll come back for you, she promised, her voice trembling but resolute. Just stay right here. I'll bring help. The foal lowered its head, as if it understood her words. Sadie turned and sprinted back toward her cabin, her thoughts racing faster than her legs. When she reached home, her mother was standing in the doorway, worry etched across her face. Sadie, where have you been? I was so worried. Mom, there's a foal in the woods, Sadie said breathlessly. He's blind, and someone abandoned him. We have to help him. A foal? Her mother asked, shocked. Yes, Mom, Sadie insisted. He's so weak he can't even stand. Please, we can't leave him there. Her mother hesitated but then sighed, grabbing an old blanket from the closet. Let's go, she said. Sadie led her mother through the dark woods, back to where the foal lay. He was still there, trembling but alive. Sadie knelt beside him again, stroking his coat. I told you I'd come back, she whispered gently. Together they wrapped the foal in the blanket and carefully lifted him. The journey home was long and exhausting, but Sadie didn't complain once. She knew in her heart that what she was doing was right. When they reached their cabin, they prepared a small corner in the backyard with hay and old blankets to make the foal a comfortable bed. Sadie brought him water and improvised warm milk with an old baby bottle. Drink a little, sweetheart. You need your strength, she coaxed gently. As the foal slowly took a few sips, Sadie stroked his head, her heart full of determination. I don't know how, she whispered, but I'm going to make you strong again. That night, as the foal slept in safety for the first time, Sadie stayed by his side, whispering promises of a brighter future. The first night was difficult. The foal barely moved, his small body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Sadie stayed close, whispering softly, It's okay now. You're safe. By morning, the little horse had managed to drink more milk, but he was still weak. Sadie sat beside him, gently brushing his pale coat with her hands. You need a name, she said thoughtfully. She studied him for a moment before smiling. How about Echo? You're like a quiet voice in the dark, but you'll grow strong enough to be heard. The name felt right, and from that moment on, Sadie poured her heart into caring for Echo. Every morning, she woke up early to check on him. She made sure his bed was clean and brought him water and milk. Slowly, Echo began to trust her. He would nuzzle her hand, his small way of showing he felt safe. But taking care of Echo wasn't easy. The foal's blindness made him hesitant to move, and Sadie knew she needed to find a way to help him navigate the world. One day, while searching through the house, she found a set of small bells. An idea sparked in her mind. She tied the bells to her wrist and gently shook them as she walked around Echo. Hear this, Echo. It's me. Follow the sound. At first, Echo didn't understand. He stood still, his ears twitching uncertainly. Sadie didn't give up. Day after day, she walked slowly around him, shaking the bells and calling his name. Finally, one afternoon, he took a hesitant step forward. "That's it, Echo," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "You're doing it." From that point on, Echo began to respond to the sound of the bells. Sadie guided him around their small backyard, helping him take one cautious step at a time. She cheered for every tiny victory, her bond with Echo growing stronger with each passing day. Sadie's mother watched her daughter's dedication with mixed emotions. She admired Sadie's determination, but worried about the challenges ahead. One evening, as Sadie was brushing Echo's coat, her mother approached. "Sadie, I'm proud of how much you care for him," her mother said gently. "But taking care of a blind horse is a lot of work. Are you sure you can handle it?" Sadie looked up, her eyes full of determination. "I have to, Mom. Echo needs me. And I think I need him too." Now, her mother sighed but couldn't argue with the love and resolve in her daughter's voice. "All right," she said softly, "but remember, it's okay to ask for help." With her mother's support, Sadie redoubled her efforts. She began creating small obstacles in the yard, using sticks and logs to teach Echo to step over them. She used her voice to guide him, calling out softly, "Step up, Echo. You can do it." At first, Echo stumbled often, his movements clumsy and uncertain. But Sadie never got frustrated. She encouraged him with gentle words and rewarded him with apple slices for every success. Slowly but surely, Echo started to move with more confidence. Not everyone understood why Sadie was putting so much effort into a blind horse. Some neighbors whispered behind her back, calling Echo a lost cause. "You should sell him," one man said bluntly. "A blind horse is useless." Sadie held her head high and replied firmly, "He's not useless. He just needs someone to believe in him." Those words became her mantra as she continued to work with Echo. Every small victory, every step forward, every obstacle cleared was a reminder that Echo was capable of more than anyone had imagined. One afternoon, something incredible happened. As Sadie guided Echo around the yard, he suddenly stopped and twitched his ears. Then, without any prompting, he began walking toward her, guided only by the sound of her voice. Sadie froze, watching in awe as Echo navigated the space on his own for the first time. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You did it, Echo. You really did it." In that moment, Sadie knew Echo was more than just a blind horse. He was a fighter. Together, they were unstoppable. As Sadie and Echo grew closer, the world outside their small yard began to take notice, and not in a good way. Word spread quickly in their small town about the blind foals Sadie was trying to train. Neighbors whispered as she walked by, shaking their heads at what they saw as wasted effort. "Why would anyone bother with a horse like that?" a woman muttered one day at the market. "You should sell him while you can, girl," a man scoffed. "A blind horse will never be worth anything." The harsh words stung, but Sadie refused to let them break her spirit. She walked away without responding, reminding herself of what she had promised Echo the night she found him, that she would never give up on him. Back at home, the yard had turned into a training ground. Sadie had built a series of small obstacles, logs, sticks, and buckets, to teach Echo to navigate around barriers. Each day they practiced together, step by step. "Okay, Echo," Sadie said one afternoon, her voice steady and encouraging. "Let's try this one. Just listen to me, and you'll do great." She led him toward a low log, shaking the bells on her wrist and calling softly, "Step up, Echo. You've got this." At first, Echo hesitated, pawing at the ground uncertainly. But with Sadie's patient guidance, he finally stepped over the log, his movements slow but sure. "Yes, that's my boy," Sadie cheered, throwing her arms around his neck. Echo nickered softly, leaning into her touch. While the neighbors continued to doubt her, Sadie's mother remained a quiet but steady source of support. One evening, as Sadie brushed Echo's coat, her mother approached with a thoughtful look. "You know, Sadie," her mother began, "people might not understand what you're doing, but I do. I see how much Echo means to you." Sadie smiled. "He's not just a horse, Mom. He's family. And one day, I'm going to show everyone just how amazing he really is." Sadie's determination deepened one morning when something unexpected happened. While practicing in the yard, Echo stopped suddenly, his ears twitching. Then for the first time, he began moving confidently on his own, guided only by the sound of Sadie's bells. Sadie watched in awe, tears filling her eyes. "You're incredible, Echo," she whispered. "I always knew you had it in you." That moment sparked a bold idea in Sadie's mind. Why stop at training Echo in their backyard? What if she could prove to everyone what he was capable of? Sadie began researching local equestrian competitions, imagining Echo trotting proudly in front of a crowd. The idea seemed crazy at first, a blind horse competing against perfectly trained champions. But the thought of showing the world Echo's strength gave Sadie a sense of purpose. "You and me, Echo," she said one evening as she stroked his mane. "We're going to show them what we can do. They'll see what I've always seen in you." Not everyone supported her dream. The whispers in town grew louder, and even Sadie's mother expressed concern. "Sadie, are you sure about this?" her mother asked. "Competing with a blind horse? It's a big challenge." "I know, Mom," Sadie replied, her voice steady. "But Echo and I have come this far. I believe in him." Her mother sighed but nodded. "If anyone can do it, it's you." Sadie's determination only grew stronger. Every challenge, every doubting word only fueled her resolve. She knew Echo had what it took to shine, and together they would prove the world wrong. The day of the competition arrived, and Sadie could hardly believe it. After months of hard work and preparation, she and Echo were about to step into the spotlight. The event was held at a grand arena on the outskirts of town, buzzing with excitement and filled with elegant horses and their riders. The competitors wore polished gear, and their horses gleamed under the sunlight, radiating power and perfection. Sadie and Echo, by contrast, were humble in appearance. Sadie had restored an old harness by hand, and Echo stood calmly by her side, his pale coat clean but unassuming. As Sadie led Echo into the arena, whispers followed her every step. "Is that the blind horse?" someone murmured. "She can't be serious," another voice scoffed. "This isn't a circus act," someone else added, laughing. Sadie felt the weight of their stares and doubts, but she refused to let it shake her. She bent down to whisper to Echo, "Don't listen to them. Just listen to me. We've got this." Her mother stood in the stands offering a small encouraging wave. Though nervous, she believed in her daughter's determination. When Sadie's name was called, the announcer's tone was neutral, almost dismissive. "Sadie Harper, competing with a blind horse." The murmurs of disbelief grew louder. Sadie held her head high and mounted Echo. She adjusted the small bells tied to his harness, her voice steady as she said, "Okay, Echo, let's show them what we can do." The course ahead was challenging, filled with jumps, sharp turns, and obstacles that tested a horse's precision and trust in its rider. Sadie took a deep breath, gave Echo the first signal, and they began. The first obstacle was a low fence, meant as a warm-up. Sadie shook the bells gently and said, "Step up, Echo." Without hesitation, Echo leaped over the fence, his movements smooth and confident. The crowd fell silent, surprised by the flawless jump. The next challenge came quickly, a set of 2 fences in succession, followed by a sharp turn. Sadie guided Echo with her voice, her signals calm and clear. "That's it, Echo. One more jump." Echo soared over the fences and made the turn without breaking stride. Gasps rippled through the audience. "Is this real?" someone whispered. "That blind horse is better than some of the others." Even Graham Winslow, sitting in the stands with his wealthy friends, couldn't ignore the growing commotion. He had been chatting idly, uninterested in the competition, but now his eyes were locked on the horse. Something about Echo's movements seemed eerily familiar. Meanwhile, Sadie and Echo faced the final stretch of the course. The obstacles grew higher and more complex, but Sadie didn't falter. "Just listen to me, Echo," she said softly, her voice full of encouragement. "You can do this." The final jump was the tallest, a daunting barrier meant to challenge even the most experienced riders. Sadie guided Echo to the starting point, her heart pounding. The arena was so quiet now that she could hear every breath Echo took. "You're amazing, Echo," she whispered. "Let's finish strong." She gave the signal, and Echo launched himself into the air. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then his hooves touched the ground on the other side, landing perfectly. The crowd erupted into cheers, the sound echoing through the arena. Sadie leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Echo's neck, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Echo! You really did it!" From his seat, Graham Winslow stared at the pair, his jaw tightening. Something about the horse tugged at his memory. Could this be? No, it couldn't. The applause didn't stop as Sadie and Echo left the course. People who had doubted them earlier now rushed to offer congratulations. "That was incredible," a young rider exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it." "Your horse is amazing," another competitor said. "He's so brave." Sadie smiled modestly, her focus still on Echo. She didn't need their approval. She was proud of what they had accomplished together. But as she prepared to leave the arena, she noticed Graham Winslow approaching. His presence was commanding, and his expression was unreadable. Sadie stood her ground, gently stroking Echo's mane. Whatever Graham had to say, she wasn't afraid. Graham Winslow walked towards Sadie with the same air of authority he carried everywhere. The crowd seemed to part around him, their voices quieting as they watched. Sadie stayed beside Echo, her hand resting protectively on his mane. "So," Graham said, his tone casual but calculated, "this is your horse? The blind one?" "Yes," Sadie replied firmly. "His name is Echo." Graham's sharp eyes studied Echo, taking in every detail, the way his ears twitched at Sadie's voice, his calm stance, and the small bells tied to his harness. There was no doubt now. This was the same foal he had ordered to be abandoned months ago. "He's remarkable," Graham admitted, though the words seemed difficult for him to say. "I didn't think a blind horse could perform like that." Sadie didn't respond, sensing there was more to come. Graham stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'll be honest with you. I made a mistake letting him go. A horse like this doesn't belong in some backyard. He belongs in a proper stable. My stable." Sadie's chest tightened, but she kept her face steady. "Echo belongs with me," she said. "I'm prepared to make you an offer," Graham continued, ignoring her. $100,000. That's more money than most people in this town will see in a lifetime." Sadie's eyes widened in shock. The amount was staggering, more than enough to help her family and improve their lives. Her mother, standing nearby, looked equally astonished. "That's a lot of money, Sadie," her mother said quietly. But Sadie didn't waver. She met Graham's gaze with determination. "Echo isn't for sale," she said. Graham's expression hardened. "Think about what you're saying. This is a blind horse. Do you know how much work it takes to keep him? With that money, you could buy a dozen horses, better ones. You could help your family. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment." Sadie shook her head, her voice steady. "Echo isn't just a horse to me. He's my friend. Together, we've worked harder than you can imagine. No amount of money can buy what we've built." Graham's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being told no, especially by a young girl. "You're making a mistake," he said sharply. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "No," Sadie replied, her voice unwavering. "You made a mistake when you abandoned him. But I won't. Echo is priceless, and he's staying with me." For a moment, Graham seemed at a loss for words. His pride wouldn't allow him to admit he was wrong, but he could see the determination in Sadie's eyes. Finally, he gave a tense smile. "Very well," he said. "But don't forget this conversation. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." As Graham turned and walked away, Sadie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her mother stepped closer, her face filled with concern. "Are you sure about what you just did, Sadie?" her mother asked. Sadie nodded firmly. "I'm sure, Mom. Echo means more to me than all the money in the world." Her mother sighed but smiled softly. "Well, then I'm proud of you." As they prepared to leave the arena, Sadie looked at Echo, who nuzzled her hand as if he understood everything. "We'll show them, Echo," she whispered. "We'll show them all." But deep down, Sadie knew this wasn't the end. Graham wasn't the kind of man to let things go so easily. The peace didn't last long. Just days after the competition, a letter arrived at Sadie's home. It was from Graham Winslow's lawyers, demanding that she surrender Echo immediately. They claimed the horse legally belonged to him because he was born on his ranch. Sadie's heart sank as she read the letter aloud to her mother. "He's trying to take Echo away from us," she said, her voice trembling. Her mother placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll fight this, Sadie. You've done everything for Echo. He's yours. Sadie and her mother visited Mr. Henderson, a kind and experienced local lawyer who had helped their family before. Mr. Henderson read through the letter carefully before looking up at Sadie. "This man has no right to claim your horse," he said firmly, "but don't underestimate him. Graham Winslow has money and power, and he'll use every tool he has to win." Sadie straightened in her chair, determination shining in her eyes. "I don't care how hard it is. I won't let him take Echo." Mr. Henderson nodded. "Then we'll fight back. But be prepared. It won't be easy." And over the next few weeks, Sadie and her mother worked closely with Mr. Henderson to prepare their case. They gathered every piece of evidence they could, from photos of Echo when Sadie first found him to witness statements from neighbors who had seen her care for him. Meanwhile, letters from Graham's lawyers kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. They claimed Sadie had no right to keep Echo, that he was part of Graham's property and should be returned. The court date arrived faster than Sadie expected. The courthouse was packed with curious townsfolk eager to see the showdown between the wealthy rancher and the young girl who had defied him. Graham sat at the front of the courtroom, flanked by his high-powered legal team. He looked calm and confident, as if the outcome was already decided. Sadie, sitting beside Mr. Henderson, felt a wave of nervousness. But when she glanced at Echo, waiting patiently outside with her mother, her resolve returned. The trial began with Graham's lawyers presenting their case. They argued that Echo was born on Graham's ranch and therefore belonged to him. They claimed Graham's decision to abandon the foal didn't change his ownership. Sadie listened quietly, her fists clenched under the table. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. She told the court how she had found Echo in the woods, abandoned and trembling. She described the nights spent nursing him back to health, the months of training, and the unbreakable bond they had formed. "Echo isn't just a horse to me," Sadie said, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's my friend. I saved him when no one else would, and I've done everything I can to give him a good life. He doesn't belong to Graham Winslow. He belongs with me." Graham's lawyers tried to dismiss her words as the sentimental ramblings of a child, but Mr. Henderson countered with clear evidence, showing how much Sadie had done for Echo and how little Graham had cared for him. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the arguments. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, the judge spoke. "The ownership of the horse named Echo is hereby granted to Sadie Harper," he said. "The evidence clearly shows that the animal was abandoned and cared for by Ms. Harper. Mr. Winslow's claims of ownership lack credibility." Tears filled Sadie's eyes as the words sank in. She had won. Echo was hers. As the judge banged the gavel, Graham's face twisted with silent fury. He stood abruptly and stormed out of the courtroom, his expensive lawyers trailing behind him. Sadie rushed outside where Echo was waiting. She threw her arms around his neck, whispering, "We did it, Echo. We really did it." The battle had been hard, but Sadie had proven that love and determination were stronger than money and power. The morning after the trial felt different. The air seemed lighter, and for the first time in weeks, Sadie didn't wake up with the weight of worry pressing on her. Echo was still hers, and nothing could take him away now. As Sadie stepped into the yard, she found Echo waiting by the fence, his ears perking up at the sound of her footsteps. She smiled, walking over to stroke his pale coat. "Good morning, champ," she said softly. "We did it." The news of Sadie's victory spread quickly through the town. At first, people couldn't believe it. A 12-year-old girl standing up to someone as powerful as Graham Winslow and winning? It was the kind of story that made people stop and think. Neighbors who had once doubted her now came by to congratulate her. "You've got more courage than most adults," one woman said. "And that horse of yours," another neighbor added, "he's something special. You proved us all wrong." Sadie accepted their kind words with a humble smile, but she didn't let it go to her head. For her, the real victory was knowing that Echo was safe and that their bond was unbreakable. Local reporters began showing up at her house, eager to share the story of the girl and her blind horse. Sadie hesitated at first, unsure about all the attention, but her mother encouraged her. "People need to hear this story," her mom said. "You and Echo have shown that anything is possible with love and determination." Sadie agreed, and soon her story spread beyond the town. Invitations to equestrian competitions in other states began arriving, and Sadie couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Echo's talent and their hard work had caught the attention of the wider world. Months passed, and Sadie and Echo's routine became focused on training for competitions. Each day brought new challenges, but Sadie embraced them with the same determination that had carried her through the trial. She wanted to show the world that Echo, despite his blindness, could be a true champion. At their first major competition since the trial, Sadie and Echo competed alongside some of the finest riders and horses in the country. The arena was grand, the stakes were high, and the pressure was immense. But Sadie didn't let any of it faze her. Standing beside Echo before their event, she whispered, "We've already won, Echo, just by being here. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." When the winners were announced, Sadie's heart nearly stopped as her name was called. She and Echo had taken first place. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Sadie wrapped her arms around Echo, her face radiant with joy. But the most unexpected moment came that evening, as Sadie prepared to leave the arena. Graham Winslow appeared, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by an expression Sadie couldn't quite read. "Sadie," he said, stepping forward. His voice lacked its usual sharpness. "I wanted to congratulate you. Echo is remarkable. What you've done with him is nothing short of incredible." Sadie studied him carefully, unsure of his intentions. "Thank you," she said simply. Graham hesitated, then continued. "You showed me something I didn't think was possible. I misjudged Echo. And you. I just wanted to say that." It wasn't an apology, not entirely, but it felt like the closest Graham could come to admitting he'd been wrong. Sadie nodded, her voice steady. "Echo and I earned everything we've achieved. Nothing was handed to us, and I won't ever let him be treated like he doesn't matter again." Graham nodded slowly, as if her words had struck a chord. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sadie and Echo under the glow of the setting sun. For Sadie, the moment wasn't about Graham's acknowledgement. It was about knowing that she and Echo had proved something bigger, that love, courage, and determination could overcome anything. Echo's story wasn't just about a blind horse. It was about seeing potential where no one else did. Sadie's unwavering love and determination turned an abandoned foal into a champion, proving that greatness isn't about being perfect. It's about heart, resilience, and never giving up. Together, Sadie and Echo showed the world that even when the odds are stacked against you, miracles can happen when you believe in yourself and those you care about. Their bond inspired everyone who saw them, reminding us that true strength comes from within. But their journey didn't stop there. Sadie and Echo continued to compete, each event a new opportunity to break barriers and challenge expectations. They became a symbol of hope, not just for horses like Echo, but for anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough. And as for Graham Winslow, his brief moment of humility raised an important question. Was his admiration genuine, or was it just a bitter acknowledgement of what he lost? Can someone like him ever truly change? Maybe it doesn't matter, because in the end, Sadie and Echo didn't need his validation. They proved their worth all on their own. This story leaves us with a powerful message. Greatness isn't about trophies or riches. It's about fighting for what matters, even when no one else believes in you. Now it's your turn. What part of Sadie and Echo's journey moved you the most? Was it the moment she found him in the woods, their hard work paying off in the arena, or her courage standing up to Graham? And do you think Graham deserved a chance at redemption? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this inspiring story. Let's keep the conversation going and celebrate the power of kindness, courage, and determination. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest champions aren't the ones born to win. They're the ones who rise when no one believes they can.